This is the Global Travel Channel podcast show, and I'm your host, Mark Philpott. So good to be back doing another show with you all, and thank you if you're a first timer for joining the show today. You've probably come along to listen to my guest who's going to be on today, and if you haven't checked out the Global Travel Channel podcast show before, there's plenty of other episodes on our website, www.globaltravelchannel.com. So many inspiring people have graced the microphones of the show and have shared their amazing travel stories, which quite often changed their lives forever. So if you want some inspiration, motivation, or even some education, then there's plenty of episodes there for you to choose from. Now on the show, I get to speak to guests not only about where they've been to, but how that event of travel changed their life, and today is no exception. I'm going to be talking to a young lady from Wisconsin in the United States of America who took a trip down under. Yes, she became an au pair in Australia, travelled all the way to the other side of the world to look after somebody's children. Couldn't she find any back at home? Let's go and find out and ask her for ourselves. Her name's Rose Petersen. Leslie, welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show.
Thank you so much for having me back.
It's really good to have you here, and I remember way back when we spoke in the beginning of time, I said to you it'd be great to have you back on the show and see how life has evolved.
Yes.
So we're going to do a bit of a trip down memory lane. So how are you feeling today? Good?
Pretty good. Can't complain. It's a little cold here in Wisconsin for my liking compared to Australia. So
I bet it is, although we are coming into winter now, as you know, so
yes.
It's a bit cooler down here.
We're hopefully going to enter into summer here soon. Hopefully it'll warm up.
Well, as you know, we're a travel show, so why don't you spend 60 seconds telling everyone around the world why they should come to Wisconsin and visit? What's there to do?
Well, Wisconsin isn't as much of a touristy area, so it'll be quieter, but it's very scenic. If you're into nature, this is the place to go because we have lakes and a lot of parks, as well as our three favorite things, which are beer, brats, and the Packers, which is a football team. So those three things, like, if you like them. Oh, and cheese. Oh, gosh. If you like any of those things, you'll love Wisconsin.
Now, that's funny. That's funny because you've just said that it's not a tourist spot. After naming those three things, I think you're going to have millions of visitors.
Well, I mean, we're touristy maybe in the summertime, but, you know, we're also nicknamed the frozen tundra. So I don't know. You might not want to come here in the winter.
I've always thought that it's a great place in the world to go and write a book.
Yes. Oh, gosh. You won't be bothered. That's for sure.
Yeah, and to get a nice little cabin by one of the lakes there,
Yes.
and just to immerse yourself in a book. So if you're out there listening today and you're about to start a book,
Yes.
and you're looking for somewhere good to go in the world, I suggest you head over to Wisconsin. And how's Balsam Lake going? Because you're near there, aren't you?
Yes, it's pretty quiet at the moment. It'll probably pick up a little bit here in the next couple weeks as it starts getting nicer out, and all of our Minnesotans will come to our lakes and use our beautiful lakes for the summer. So
there you go. I better send this recording to the Wisconsin Tourist Office and tell them we're taking care of business for them. So, as you know, I asked my guests to dedicate this show to someone special in their life. So who would you like to dedicate your show to today?
I would like to dedicate it to my Australian family back in Sydney that housed me for the last 6 months. You know, I haven't seen them for about 2 months now, but I miss them dearly.
Fantastic. And you're going to throw some names out there?
Yes, so there's Marina and Anthony, the mom and the dad, and then we have Roisin and Aiden, who are the two kids.
Okay, fantastic. Well, there you go, fam. There's your dedication from your long-lost au pair. But we're going to catch up with a lot of memories today, so I'm sure it's going to be a trip down memory lane for everybody.
Hopefully.
Now, I was really interested in talk to you back in the day, and if you haven't listened to Leslie's first episode with me, she had just started her au pair journey in Australia, And you should go back and listen to it, because today's show is really a kind of what did I learn from the experience, how did it change me, where did I go to, and all those sorts of things. So I was really keen to get Leslie back, because we talk often on the Global Travel Channel show about how travel changes people and their lives and their outlook on the world. And today's going to be a little bit of that with Leslie. So let's get into it. And first of all, Leslie, why don't you update those people who didn't listen to the first show? Shame on them for not listening to the first show. Why don't you update them on what made you want to be an au pair and head off overseas?
Well, I had graduated from university May 2019, so wasn't exactly ready to go get my career yet, and wanted to do a lot of traveling because I'm still pretty young. So that's kind of what got me going on trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And a friend of mine had au paired in Spain before. And so after asking a lot of questions with her, decided that au pairing would be kind of fun. And I'd always had a love for Australia since I was a child. So I just wanted to get out there and explore. And thankfully, everything kind of fell into place, and probably had one of the greatest experiences of my life because of it.
Did you kind of view it as an opportunity to have a bit of a gap? I don't want to call it a year, but a gap time or gap period in your life?
Yes, definitely. Because I think in the US here, it's not as common for us to take gap years. So it kind of was viewed as a gap year in a sense. I mean, I'm definitely not into a career yet, but yeah, it was a good way to kind of give myself a break before starting off into that businessy world.
What's the definition of an au pair?
So essentially, they're basically like a nanny. It's really based off of this cultural exchange. So it's kind of frowned upon to go an au pair in your own country, because you know basically what that country is like. So they want this cultural exchange. So different people from different countries will go, and that way the family gets an experience as well as the au pair. So my family in Australia was able to learn a lot about the United States, and vice versa. I was allowed to learn a lot about Australia. So
did you change all their opinions about America?
I mean, I kind of agreed with some of their opinions, but a little bit, yeah. I think they learned a lot about the food that we eat here compared to Australia. So
we're going to get into that shortly, but I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the au pair thing, in terms of, is there an age limit on how old you can be to be an au pair?
It really depends on the family. A lot of families are generally looking for someone between like 18 and 30 is kind of a good ballpark range. But I have seen some that'll take older au pairs, but most of the time the older people have established some sort of career, so they aren't really looking to go out and nanny for a family. But they are out there, not as common.
What's the oldest you've come across, somebody that's being an au pair?
The oldest I think I've met was like 28 or so.
Oh, wow. Really old.
Yes, very old, ancient.
I've been thinking lately of sending my little puppy dog out to be an au pair, because I think he would take care of lots of kids around the world.
I think lots of kids would probably like to take care of him. So precious.
Now, when you're sitting there in Wisconsin and you're kind of thinking, okay, I want to go to Australia and be an au pair, how do you actually go about it? How do you become an au pair?
Well, there's this website called aupairworld.com, and that's basically where you can meet your family and figure out a lot of the logistics. So that's how I came across their profile initially. And
is it a site, I was just going to ask, is it a site that's kind of like really, really populated with both people looking to be an au pair and families that are looking for one?
Yeah. So all the families have to pay some sort of fee to be on there, so you know that they're legit. But any au pair can go on there and just put their profile out. So it's really easy to navigate and use, and almost every major country is on there, and you could probably find a family.
Yeah, right. So once you've gone onto the site and you've seen a family, what's the process then? How do you get connected to each other?
So you can match with a family and then you just kind of start communicating. So most families are pretty open about what they're looking for, what your daily life would be like, if you would have days off or time to travel. And then as an au pair or as a family member, you can ask a lot of questions, which is something some au pairs are kind of scared to do. And personally, I wish I would have asked more questions. But I was just so excited to go and to do this. But after you've asked all these questions, then you kind of make that decision. And once you've both accepted and come to those agreements, then you can start searching for your flight and be across the world.
So I'm imagining for a minute that there's lots of young girls in particular. Are there many young guys doing this?
You know, mostly what I've seen are girls. I don't think I came across a male au pair in my time.
Wow.
I know they're out there. They're out there.
There's an opportunity. Someone's listening and thinking, I'm going to start an au pair company for teenage boys. There we go.
Exactly. They should.
Yeah. So did this aupair.com, world.com, did they have kind of a process in terms of the way that you communicated with the host family, or was it just up to you two to work it out?
It's mostly up to the family and the au pair. They do have a lot of question and answers. If you are somebody like me who had no clue about this, and it kind of says, oh, you know, these are some things you should maybe ask about, or kind of figure out when you're in this messaging process with the family. So that was helpful.
Okay. Had you spent a lot of time around kids and that in your life before you went off to do this?
Yes and no. I mean, I did a lot of babysitting for like family members, you know, like the obligations, and like the neighbors and stuff like that. But not a huge amount of nannying kids or really taking care of them other than, you know, interactions at school and things like that. So it was kind of out there.
You obviously love kids though.
Yes, I do. I mean, to be an au pair, you definitely have to love kids and be able to deal with and have a lot of patience with.
Yeah, don't sign up to this if you think you're going to sit in your bedroom every night and watch Netflix all night long.
Yeah, that will not be it.
Yeah, exactly. So from the time that the family that you'd reached out to and you came to an agreement on when you were going to start, how long was it before you got on the big plane and headed for days to get to Australia?
Well, I think I came to agreements that I was going to go to Australia probably mid-July. And had to take care of a few things first, and then actually flew to Australia in mid-October. So it was a couple months out, and most families try to look a couple months out just to make sure they aren't left without anybody.
Yeah, right. So quite a long haul flight to get down under, and you had plenty of time to think about what was ahead of you. Was there many fears and scares in your mind as you left home to come to Australia?
Oh, yes. I honestly, getting on that plane, I was terrified because I'm like, this is going to be the longest 6 months of my life. Oh my gosh, my pets, my family. But once you get on the plane and kind of relax a little bit, you know, it was pretty good. The first like 12 hours weren't too bad. And then the last two, I realized, oh my goodness, I am going to be in Australia in just a few short hours. So a lot of mixed emotions, but overall was able to keep my composure.
Did you do much research about Australia as a country? Were you online looking at stuff and finding out how they actually talk down here?
A little bit, not too much. I mean, a lot of the things you read online aren't exactly true, but so I kind of wanted to leave it to my imagination until I actually got there. But I did a little bit of research so I didn't look like a total fool when I got off the plane, but learned a lot while I was there.
I bet. What star sign are you?
Star sign?
Yeah. What's your
like zodiac? Oh, I'm a Gemini.
You're a Gemini?
Yes.
Okay, well, I've got some very good friends that are Gemini. So to categorize you, you don't like sitting still for too long. You don't like being bored. You've got to be traveling all the time and
Yes.
moving.
That sounds about right.
Okay, I nailed it. I nailed it, right?
Yep, that's accurate.
So for any parents that are listening today or teenagers who want to jump into this, what would be your few tips of advice on the process you've just explained in terms of how would you do it differently if you were to do it again by doing the research side of it in terms of, finding a family and the questions that you ask? What would you do differently next time?
And I say this to anybody that's reached out to me too that has considered being au pair. I think the biggest thing is asking questions. I think you can learn so much from your family. And I was just nervous to ask a lot of questions, even the basic things like, what's my room gonna look like, or anything like that. Like everything went smooth while I was there. Even talking to other au pairs, though, they have said, I wish I would have asked more questions. So that's probably the biggest thing anybody can do, and like not be afraid to ask those questions, because essentially you are picking up your life and moving halfway across the world. So you want to make sure that everything, that you know everything. There were a few things where I was a little scared of not knowing, and that's probably the biggest thing, is actually knowing those things before you get on that plane would have been nice.
So what would have been one of the questions you would have asked now if you remember back?
Oh gosh. I think one of the biggest things I would have asked was, oh gosh, I don't even know. Probably I would have liked to know what my room looked like, because I think I had such a big imagination of what it was going to look like. It was very different, but like it was perfect for me and wouldn't have changed it any other way.
Yeah, I would have been asking for photos of my room and under the bed and everything.
Every nook and cranny.
How big's my wardrobe?
Yeah.
How many clothes can I hang up? Do I get free hangers?
Yeah, little things like that. Like, do I have a dresser? Do I have a wardrobe? What's my shower look like? Because that's so important.
Yeah, and what time do I have to wake up in the morning?
Oh, yeah. Yep, little things like that. Oh, my goodness, I'm not a morning person, and I got up at like 6:10 every morning.
Well, there you go. And, we laugh about that, but it's such an important thing, because if you're not that way inclined, then you can find these things. I've heard of au pairs that have to get up at 4:00 in the morning.
Yes, exactly.
And it can be a soul destroyer if you're not a morning person, right? So,
Exactly.
We might be laughing about this, but I think it's all very practical and serious questions at the end of the day, yeah?
Yes. I mean, I'm so happy and thankful for how my experience went, but I think that would have been the only thing I would have changed, is more questions.
Yeah. So you had travelled before you did this trip to Australia, and you'd been to different places. How did the actual travel experience differ, because you were going to do essentially a job and you were going to a strange country to do that? How were the emotional differences for you from a travelling perspective?
Well, it was a little different because I think it was hard to figure out if I was on vacation or if I was working. And au pairing essentially was kind of a mixture of the two, because you're not exactly there going 9 to 5, working behind a desk kind of work, but you aren't there to go lay on a beach all day, every day. So it was difficult trying to find that balance in my mind of what exactly I was doing. But, it all went smooth, thankfully, and was able to still do the working aspect and still get to relax on the beach and do things on the weekend. But in my mind, I think even all the other au pairs, we went back and forth like, okay, what brain am I? Am I vacationing? Am I just relaxing? What's going on?
I was going to ask you about that in terms of the au pair community. Do you kind of stick together? Do you get to know other ones that are in town? And do you, actually get together socially and go and do things?
Yeah, there's numerous Facebook groups that I joined, like Au Pairs in Sydney, and I think that's actually how we initially met. And there's so many au pairs out there who'll be like, hey, I want to go to the opera house tonight and have a drink. Anyone want to come with? And that's how I met a lot of my friends. Just, hey, let's go to the Blue Mountains, or let's do this. Okay, let's all meet at this time. So there's actually a huge community of them. And, everyone's kind of in the same boat of trying to gain friends and have these experiences. So that was really nice and actually a lot easier than I thought.
See, I want to reiterate to all these teenage boys out there listening: listen to what listen to what you're missing out on. You've got essentially a huge dating scene waiting for you here if
true.
you're into the au pair. Yeah, like
True.
I really think they need to step up and get into this. Instead of going to Bali surfing all the time, you could be in Sydney with about 100 au pair girls running around the place.
I mean, You're not wrong.
So, obviously, with others, when you're socialising with other au pairs, you're talking about your respective host families and gossiping about all that sort of stuff. Were there many that weren't happy and they weren't in a good place?
Yeah, I did meet a few that, I really felt for them. And anytime I was just having not the greatest day, I'd always think of them like, okay, it could be so much worse, or, I could be in such a worse situation than anyone. And, there was this one family that she basically, their au pair family didn't even talk to her and like kind of treated her really badly. And she made every meal, and she was with them for a whole year, which I think that's insane if you weren't happy. But, everything and anything could be worse, even on your worst day. So I'm very grateful for my great situation compared to some others.
So what's the rules of the engagement? Can you walk out anytime you want if you're not happy? Can you leave?
I mean, it's kind of frowned upon. In Australia, I don't think they have any contracts. Certain countries, they do have contracts. But, like, if you aren't happy, most of the time you do voice it to your host family. And, the au pair community is very out there about just saying stuff to your family and having that talk if you are in an uncomfortable situation. So they kind of encourage to talk about it first. Yeah. But, there are, I'm sure, some instances where au pairs have just said, hey, I'm leaving tomorrow, and little situations like that, which would be very unfortunate, but in certain situations you can definitely understand.
I can get that. Now, we'd like to know a little bit more about a typical day with the family that you were with. So, as you said before, it's not all about laying on a beach and getting a tan at Bondi in Australia, is it? It's about, working in with the family's needs, because that's what you're there for, and then you've got your social time. So what did a typical day look like for you?
So my typical day was very different than what most au pairs go through, which thank goodness, because it was pretty great. So other than getting up really early in the morning, but I survived. So I get up around 6:15, 6:10, somewhere in there, and go upstairs and wake the boy up and get him downstairs to have some breakfast. So we'd quickly eat and he'd get ready for the day, and I'd quickly throw something on and put my hair up because I wasn't getting ready in the morning. But after we ate breakfast and got our things ready, get in the car and I'd drive them to school, or him to school at least. And once I dropped him off right in the CBD, I'd come back to the house, and generally by then the dad and the daughter would have already gotten on the bus and went into the city. So then my day was mainly just kind of cleaning around the house. So I did a lot of dusting and sweeping and just kind of tidying up, because it was a big house, and, dust keeps coming back, unfortunately. Somebody hasn't figured out how to get rid of dust. But so I'd do a lot of that stuff, and usually I'd put some Netflix on my phone and just listen to some sort of show while I was cleaning. And then usually about noon or so, I'd go to the gym, or I basically just went to the gym most days. And then around 3 o'clock, I'd go into the city and pick the kids up. And then the kids are extremely busy, which is why I was there, because they're super busy, and you can only be one place at one time.
Yeah.
So the boy would have some choir practices at night, and the girl would have dance practices certain nights, and they'd have drama another night. So there was always something going on. So generally, I would be off with one of the kids, running them to whatever practice they had that night. So, and then what do you know? It'd be supper time, and then we'd probably watch a TV show and then go to bed.
So was there an au pair there before you came?
Yes. So I was oh gosh, they've had au pairs for about 5 or 6 years.
Hmm.
So they're pretty used to having this stranger in their house. So.
So were the kids saying you're not as good as the last girl?
No, thankfully they said I was one of the best. That would be
horrible.
sad.
Wouldn't it be horrible if the little boy was looking at you saying, you're not as nice as the last girl I had? That'd be terrible, wouldn't it?
I don't know if I could do that. No, thankfully I was one of the better ones, and it was hard leaving them because we had grown such a good bond in 6 months. And
yeah. So tell me about the morning thing, because it sounds to me like before you started this gig, you weren't a morning person.
Well, I like my sleep, and I think if they were listening to this, they would know I like my sleep.
Yeah.
But I'll get up. I'm not usually the brightest and bubbliest person at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, but eventually we get there and wake up a little bit. I was able to do it. I'm not grouchy, but I'm not bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
So are you a morning person now?
Oh, no, not at all. I don't think I'll ever be a morning person.
So it didn't change you, huh?
Oh, no, I still love my sleep. I actually slept until 10 o'clock this morning, too. So, whoops.
Fantastic. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to get you back on the show was you had plenty of time to see lots of different things while you were in Australia, and also have some amazing experiences, not only in Australia, but some other countries on the way home and things. So how about we go through some of those experiences? Where do you want to start with places that you went to?
Oh, gosh, we could start in Australia because there's a long list of them.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, one of my first trips that I got to do was go up to Cairns and see the Great Barrier Reef, which was absolutely amazing. One of my bucket list items that I wanted to do in Australia. And oh my gosh, I'd love to go back.
So did it live up to expectations? Because a lot of people come to Australia and they kind of think, Great Barrier Reef, as you just said, it's one of the bucket list items. You've come from the other side of the world and you don't have anything like that in Wisconsin, that's for sure.
Oh gosh, for sure.
So was it such an eye-opening experience for you? What did you love about it the most?
Well, I paid a little extra to go scuba diving, which that was amazing. Just, I think, knowing that I was seeing the Great Barrier Reef and actually getting to get that close to such an iconic place was probably the biggest thing for me. And just saying that I've gotten to do it is amazing. I mean, Cairns, the town, not so much. Like, it's not as resorty as I thought it was going to be. But the Great Barrier Reef just blew anything in Cairns out of the water. So it was top of the list. A most amazing thing I think I did.
I'm interested to know when you were diving there, the climate police around the world would, or in particular in Australia, would let us to believe that the reef is dying and that it's horrible and all the rest of it. What were your personal experiences with diving on the reef?
Where we were, the specific spot, it was gorgeous and it looked very vibrant and very full of life. But I know there are definitely some spots that aren't doing so well, and hopefully we can turn that around and fix it so that we don't lose the Great Barrier Reef, because after seeing that, I couldn't imagine not having it.
Did the dive company make you aware of that? Did they say that parts of the reef were not in good shape? Or?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know they did comment on saying some things that we can do. And even while we are down there diving and snorkeling, they said not to touch anything because, that can damage it, or that can also, deplete it. So we wanted to make sure that we left it the way we found it.
Yeah, great. Now, while you're up in Cairns, and for people listening around the world today who don't know exactly the geography of the places we're talking about in Australia, if you look at a map of Australia right now, we're talking about on the east coast, on the right-hand side, at the very, or near the very top of the east coast, is the area that Leslie is talking about that she went to. So she was in Sydney, and just to give people some kind of idea on distances in Australia, because it is a very vast nation, getting from Cairns to Sydney is roughly around a 3-hour flight, isn't it, Leslie?
Yep, about right.
Yeah. So 3 hours flight time, you can almost go across America in that time, not too much longer. So, and this is not from one end of Australia to the other. This is just from Sydney up to Cairns. So it's a long way. And if you're even thinking about driving it, you're talking about somewhere like 3,000 plus kilometres, which is a
huge
heck of a long way. So while you're up in the Cairns area, what else did you get to see, Leslie?
So I was able to get up to the Daintree Rainforest, which that was absolutely gorgeous to drive through. I just took like a day trip that they brought us up there, and we went looked for crocodiles on a boat, and just went diving in some, or not diving, but swimming in some water hole in the middle of the rainforest. And it was just so beautiful up there.
I hope they didn't take you to the crocodile pools to swim in.
Thankfully, no. They made sure that there were no big snakes or anything around us.
So a vast difference from going from the middle of Sydney, one of the busiest, if not the busiest city in Australia, to this beautiful part of the world, which is very tropical and very lush. And yeah, it's like being in a completely different world, isn't it, Leslie?
Yes, it really is. Compared to Sydney with the hustle and bustle, and then you go there, it was very serene and very gorgeous to look at.
Yeah, and I think that's something important if you're considering a trip to Australia. The diversity of the country can offer you really so many different things. So let's talk about things a little bit closer to home. When you're in Sydney, you have plenty of opportunities to see the local area. So what were some of the highlights for you getting around Sydney and spending time in Sydney?
Well, of course, my favorite thing was seeing the Opera House. I think it was insane to actually be there and to go inside of it. You see all these pictures of it, and then finally being in its presence was amazing. I mean, it looks very different when you're really close to it compared to what you would imagine. I honestly was disappointed the first time I saw it. But once you get to see it a few more times and see it lit up at night, it's like, oh, wow, there's the Opera House. Like, it's pretty amazing.
It was smaller than you had imagined, right?
Yes, it was. And like the inside is very 1970s and like concrete until you're in the theater, and then you're just amazed.
Yeah. Did you go to any concert or anything inside?
I went to a few. I went to the Choir of Man in one of like the smaller theaters, and then I went to see the Don Giovanni opera.
Oh, wow.
So had to see an opera at the Sydney Opera House. Like, come on, you have to.
It's got such amazing acoustics.
Yes, it was such a good opera.
Phenomenal. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Okay, what else in Sydney on the list that people must do that you went to and had a great time?
Well, my favorite thing to do was explore. So we went to the Blue Mountains one weekend, which is so scenic. It's like if you can't get anywhere else in Australia, I definitely recommend going to the Blue Mountains because it's only about an hour outside of Sydney or so, and it's pretty significantly different than the skyscrapers that you have in Sydney. So it's gorgeous out there.
And what time of the year did you go up there? Was it summertime, was it?
Yes, I believe it was end of October, beginning of November, so just starting to get nice out.
It's really lovely up there in the wintertime as well because they actually have had a bit of snow up there at times.
Oh,
and
wow.
You can lock yourself away in a nice bed and breakfast and have cozy things and all that sort of stuff. So regardless of the time of the year, Blue Mountains is a very good destination to head to.
Yes.
Okay, what else took your fancy in and around the Sydney area?
Well, I did love going up to Manly and exploring up there. Just because it's it's still considered Sydney, but it's just kind of got its own little feel because it is so far north compared to everything else. And I loved going and exploring all these little suburbs and getting to go into the shops and stuff. Kind of did a lot of thrift shopping while I was in Sydney, so I had found out where all the hot thrift shops are.
So where had been some of the other big cities you'd been to before coming to Australia?
I had been to Berlin and Prague and Rome. Oh gosh, where else?
So how did Sydney compare when you were going, or you got to actually live in Sydney, which is different than visiting places?
Yes,
So
very different.
But how did you enjoy it compared to those? Because Berlin's an amazing city and Prague's an incredible place as well. So how did you kind of rate them?
I mean, it was very hard. Sydney had a lot more of a businessy and touristy feel than the other cities in Europe that I'd been to. They of course were very touristy, but they had that old time feel with the older architecture, where Sydney was very much felt a lot newer with the buildings and not so old and ancient as some others.
Yeah, right. Okay. Now, you also had a opportunity while in Australia during this time to head to one of the most iconic sporting events in Australia every year, and you got to rub shoulders with someone very famous. Can you tell us about that?
Oh my gosh, the greatest weekend ever. Well, I got to go to Melbourne and go to the Australian Open, which highly recommend. So I played tennis in high school, so I've always kind of been obsessed with the sport a little bit. And it just so happened that it fell while I was in Australia. So, of course, I thankfully got to go. So I just spent like 3 days walking around watching tennis and going to all these matches. But the coolest part was that they have these practices. So all these huge tennis stars go and practice and you can watch them. And so I got to meet and witness a lot of practices with like Nadal and the Williams sisters and a bunch of other famous people. But my favorite one is Novak Djokovic, who, by the way, won the tournament. Just want to put that out there. Well,
He did.
I went to 2 of his practices, and at one of his practices, I actually got his arm sweatband.
Oh, wow.
And he signed it, which was pretty cool.
Wow, so you've got a Novak Djokovic sweatband.
Yes, I do. I was so proud of it. He only gave out 2 of them, and I saw him signing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, Novak, please, please.
Have you washed it?
Oh gosh, no, never.
No, don't wash it. No.
It's pretty gross, and I'm not going to lie. It was really sweaty because it was so hot.
Yeah.
But, we forgot about that because it's Novak Djokovic. Like, come on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, well, I'm going to send him this podcast and see if he responds, because I want to have him on my show and have a chat to him about touring the world as a #1 tennis player.
He's amazing. I highly recommend talking to him. He's such a down-to-earth person. He was bringing kids on the tennis court to play practice with him, and he's so nice.
He's a bit of a polarizing figure. I think the press don't do him any favors, and they've tried to create this kind of aura around him that kind of sets him apart from the angels that Nadal and Federer are kind of being positioned at, and he has a bit of a hard time with that, and you probably would have seen it during the matches with the crowds and everything in the way that they behave towards the guy. But it's good that you got something out of that and that you got to spend. But that whole event is just something phenomenal, isn't it? It's such a great time. Yeah.
It's just so cool because even some people weren't really there to watch tennis. They were just kind of chumming around, having some drinks, hanging out with friends. There were so many hen parties there, and it just is such a cool atmosphere. Yeah.
And Melbourne's such a great city for sport. Like the Melbournians, the Victorians, they just live for their sport, whether it be the AFL football in the wintertime or whether it be the cricket and the tennis in the summertime. It's just a mecca for sport, actually.
Yes, it's a gorgeous city, too, to explore. I didn't do too much exploring just because my main focus was tennis, but it's very different feeling compared to Sydney. It's got more of that old feeling to it.
It's a more of a European city feel than what Sydney is. Did you get to go and sit in Rod Laver Arena?
I did not. Those
No?
tickets were going like 250 for one seat, and I'm like, oh gosh. But I did get to go to the Margaret Court. So
Okay.
I got a
Yeah.
chance to watch in one of the
Well,
bigger arenas.
yeah, that's an experience in itself, isn't it?
Yes, it is truly amazing.
I thought au pairs could afford centre court at the Australian Open, eh?
Oh,
On the big
yeah,
wages you guys are
oh yeah, we get paid the big bucks.
on. Okay, so a great trip to Melbourne to watch the tennis, and for somebody that's into tennis, that would have been a real bucket list item, so I can
Yes.
appreciate that you had a good time. Now, you spent a couple of days up close and personal with animals. Can you tell us about that one?
Yes. So another bucket list item, of course, was getting to go to the Australia Zoo. You know, growing up as a kid, I had watched The Crocodile Hunter and had seen Bindi shows growing up. So, of course, being that close, I had to go see it. So I made sure I bought the 2-day pass and went up to the middle of nowhere, basically, where the Australia Zoo is. it's
Yeah, that's true.
it's like an hour from Brisbane, I believe.
Yep.
Just kind of out in the middle of nowhere. But it's amazing. I am blown away with what the Irwins have done with that place. It's just so well done.
They get a bit of a bad rap in Australia, to be honest. So I'm interested to know what the American view is of all that. You said you were kind of, starstruck by them when you were back home. Is it something that most Americans see as a real Aussie kind of outback kind of, animal thing?
Yeah, I would say they are top of the list. Like if I say Australian, you're more than likely going to go right to either the Hemsworth brothers or the Irwins.
Yeah, okay, that's different ends of the scale, isn't it?
Yes, very different.
From Thor to alligator wrestlers.
Yes. Well,
But
everyone
I,
knows the crocodile hunter here. Everyone.
but I would have thought you guys have got tons of those kinds of guys down in the Everglades over there, like fighting
Oh.
alligators all the time and stuff.
Yeah, we just call them rednecks, and we don't. They usually don't become famous.
Or for the wrong reasons, let's say.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, well, yeah, there's no doubt that Steve Irwin's left an amazing legacy behind.
Yes.
And yeah, so what were your favourite animals there?
Well, I am a little biased because I paid a little extra to do some animal encounters because they offered that, and how cool would it be to see these animals? So I got to go behind the scenes and go into one of their lemur enclosures.
Yeah,
So one thing that people might not know about the Australia Zoo is that they have so many animals, but not all of the animals are on display because they don't have the enclosures for them yet for the
yeah.
public to view. So the two animals I saw were all behind the scenes. So I got to go chum around with the lemurs and feed them, and they were hanging from trees, so I got a cute little picture with them.
Mm.
And then I also got to see a cheetah and pet a cheetah and take a
Yeah.
picture with her, which that was amazing because I don't think I'll ever get that experience again.
Mm. So what are your thoughts about these zoos? Like, do you think these animals should be kept in captivity, or do you think they should be out in the wild in their own natural places?
Well, I think it really depends on the animal. You know, I actually work with animals here in Wisconsin in a smaller, not necessarily a zoo, but very similar. And, you know, most of our animals are born in captivity or cannot be released to the wild. And, you know, I trust the Irwins with their zoo that they're doing the right things. I know there are some zoos and some aquariums out there that, you know, they might not do the greatest thing for the animal. So I don't agree with that at all. But I think if things are done tastefully and, you know, these animals are well taken care of, I think it's okay personally.
Do you think there should be tighter restrictions around, people being audited that run these places to make sure that they are taking care of the animals' well-being at all times?
Oh, yes. I definitely think they should be very regulated because, I mean, they're such in the public's eye, you know. The animals are there to educate people, and we don't want their judgment of these animals to be swayed because of mistreatment or anything like that. You know, a tiger, yes, could be aggressive, but, we don't want to see that, and we want to make sure that these tigers and all these other animals are well taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's leave the animals behind now. And I was super excited to find out that you had been to my home country while you were down here.
Yeah.
And I think now we should jump across the Tasman Sea and talk about the magnificent country that is New Zealand. And you can tell us about how amazed you were at how beautiful the place was.
Oh gosh, you're not wrong there. It is absolutely beautiful. I mean, you might be a little biased, but I'm not. It is gorgeous there. It's so different from Australia. And so I got to go to Queenstown, New Zealand, the adrenaline capital.
Yeah.
And I picked that place because it was either like that adrenaline feeling, and I knew it was very scenic there as well. So I kind of got a mixture of both. But I didn't.
Did you have a nice weather?
Oh, well, I mean, compared to Australia, it was a little cold, but it was okay. It was pleasant.
Yeah, but I mean, sunny skies. Did you get any sunshine and stuff, or was it cloudy?
It was a little cloudy.
Because it makes a huge difference.
I think one of the days was really nice and gorgeous and sunny.
Yeah, right. So what did you did skydiving in New Zealand?
Yes, I went to Wanaka and decided this crazy idea to go skydiving. I don't know where that came from. And my parents are like shocked that I actually jumped out of a plane.
Did you tell them beforehand you were going to do it?
Sort of. I didn't really tell her I was going to book skydiving. I just sent a text like, oh, I'm going skydiving tomorrow, and left it at that.
I kind of have this thing that everybody should be made to skydive once in their life.
Yeah, it's definitely an experience, to say
it
the
is,
least.
isn't it? And I think it's because you learn so much about yourself in those seconds before you get pushed out of a plane, right? Like,
oh, so true.
Isn't it true?
I think I froze up, and like the guy I was strapped to basically did all the work because there was no way my body was pushing me towards the door.
I've always thought that because it's just, for people that haven't done it, it's just like, it's hard to explain, first of all, because it's a very personal thing about your own fears, right? But
yes.
It's like the last 5 seconds inside the plane and the first 5 seconds outside, your world changes just in that such a short period of time, right?
Yes, it's so true. And, people try and compare it to the indoor skydiving.
Oh, no.
But it's really not the same. When you're 15,000 feet in the air, like your brain really can't wrap your mind around how high up you are. And it's such a big experience that you really can't explain until you've actually experienced it.
Well, I'm so pleased that you did your first skydive in New Zealand because that's something that'll never be taken away from you. And the Wanaka area around there is just so spectacular. So tell us about the dive. How was it? How was the adrenaline of floating down to earth?
Oh my gosh, it goes by so fast. That's one thing they don't tell you is how quick you are back on the ground.
Yeah.
But I was really nervous about the free fall aspect because, I don't like roller coasters, so I didn't know how I would do on free fall. But actually, free fall was my favorite part.
Okay.
You don't realize how fast you're actually going, and you just kind of get your cheeks blown around, and it's actually really cool. And then they pull the parachute, and your brain starts to catch up, oh my gosh, I'm so high up in the air, I'm just strapped to this random stranger with 2 little clips, and it was kind of funny. He's like, oh, I'm just going to loosen this one strap up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, don't do that. But it was so amazing, and he spun us around a few times. Thankfully, that day I had such clear skies, so I could see all the beautiful hills and valleys, and it was spectacular. I think I would do it again, but I'd have to be somewhere very scenic like that because, how can you top New Zealand?
Exactly right. I couldn't have said it better. I couldn't have said it better myself. Have you ever been parapenting?
Oh gosh, I don't even know what that is.
Okay, well that's your next thing. So forget about skydiving now. You've done that.
Oh gosh.
Parapenting is that much better again because you get to stay up there for longer.
Oh, wow.
And Parapenting is when you jump off the side of a mountain with a parachute and a sleeping bag, basically. You can lay down in this thing. It's like a harness and a sleeping bag. And you can just float on the thermals for hours, literally.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I'd have the guts to do that.
And it's the closest thing to being a bird, I think. I'm not into those wingman suit things that these guys jump off mountains with, but this is just like a very relaxed way of being a bird.
Oh gosh.
And not dropping to the ground at 100,000 miles an hour. So put that on your list, because I think you might enjoy that. And they do it in New Zealand, so next time you're down under, you can do it.
I think
okay, what about the Milford? What about Milford Sound? Did you go to Milford Sound?
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh. That was top of my list, too, to see in New Zealand, other than some sort of adrenaline thing. My mom had always wanted to see, like, the fjords. And so I'm like, well, might as well go to Milford Sound, take a day trip there.
Yep.
And it's the weirdest thing. As the crow flies, you could get there in no time. But you have to take, like, a 3-hour trip around the mountains to get there.
Yeah.
But it was gorgeous. It was kind of a cooler day and a little cloudy, but we were able to see the glaciers, and I think that was my first time actually seeing a glacier.
Oh, brilliant. Did you see Mitre Peak, the big peak inside Milford Sound?
Yes, I believe so. I think the clouds just cleared enough.
Okay, great. Well, I'll tell you what, get on YouTube someday and have a look at a couple of people. There's a couple of people that have done amazing YouTube videos of actually climbing up Mitre Peak.
Oh, wow.
And it's quite extraordinarily scary because on both sides it just drops straight down into the fjord.
Oh.
And that's another way of looking at Milford Sound. So check that out when you get a chance.
Yeah,
Did you do any hiking in New Zealand? Did you get out and do some hiking?
Not too much because I only had a couple days. But I did do a little bit of hiking around the Queenstown area, up, the big Queenstown Hill and such. But that's about it.
What did you think of the New Zealand food?
I'm kind of upset that I didn't wait in line for the Ferg burger or the Fergie burger. I didn't go there because I'm like, well, it's just a hamburger. Like, Americans have hamburgers, so I'm kind of upset I didn't do that. But other than that, the food was really good. I love the sausage rolls and the meat pies. So good.
So I'm interested to ask you as an American, and I want you to be completely honest with us. What did you find different about the New Zealand people versus the Australian people?
I feel like I didn't interact with too many New Zealanders because, like, Queenstown was, like, all backpackers and people. So I don't remember too much of an interaction with New Zealanders. But
what about the guy that had you hanging on his back jumping out of a plane?
Oh, well, I mean, he was very friendly. I mean, they were pretty friendly. Everyone in Sydney seems to, like, kind of keep to their own and do their own thing. But I don't know, people in Queenstown were pretty friendly and out there and very relaxed.
So you haven't come back thinking, okay, Kiwis are not nice people or anything like that?
I mean, every Kiwi I've met has been nice, so there hasn't been one that's turned me off yet.
There you go. Boom. That's the answer I wanted. Now we can move on. Okay, so let's put New Zealand behind us. You're like a jet-setting au pair professional here, yeah? All this time you've got to spend traveling around to all these amazing places while you're looking after a couple of kids.
Oh, I know. I look back and I'm like, that was the craziest 6 months of my life. I can't even bring my mind to wrap around all the things that I've done.
Yeah. I'm sitting here as a 55-year-old man thinking I'm going to sign up for this gig. It sounds pretty good.
I don't think I would have been able to do it if I wouldn't have had such a great family.
Yeah, true. I guess that makes the big difference, doesn't it?
Yes, they were very supportive and very willing to negotiate and very flexible. So that was awesome. Yeah,
cool. Now, Singapore, another place I've lived. So let's talk about the wonderful garden city, they like to call it now, because it's pretty amazing. Was it the first time you'd been to Singapore?
Yes, and let me tell you, I wish I would have had more time because I just had my layovers there, so I didn't really have a lot of time to explore, just enough to quickly get into a taxi and see, those famous things, but definitely on my list to go back.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those famous things that you saw. What were they?
Well, I got to see the Marina Bay Sands, the big casino hotel thing. Like everyone knows what it looks like, and the big towers with the big boat-looking architecture on the top. It's the only way I can describe it.
It's very unique, isn't it?
Very unique. It was so weird, like actually seeing it, because it's huge. It's got like underground malls and all of this stuff, and very busy.
They built it when I was living there, and the day they finished it, I thought this thing's going to fall over. Like,
oh gosh,
it's just going to tumble one day because it kind of gave me that impression. But it's obviously built very well.
Still standing.
It looks a bit top heavy, doesn't it? When you
yes, it does. It's kind of eerie when you walk around it. Like, oh gosh, okay.
How did you find the whole experience of Singapore, even though you're there for a short period of time? Did it feel very clinical to you, or was it not so much?
Yes and no. It kind of went both ways. Very different feelings as you walk around, because it obviously is very touristy. But you're also going to have like these high-class business people, and it seems so new for the city. Like, everything seemed so brand new walking around, and I liked it there. I could potentially live there.
Okay.
But,
so you have it on your list to go back to one day?
Oh, yes. I'd love to spend more time exploring, because, I didn't get to see the lion head, which I'm kind of sad about.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know where it was, but...
Well, you went to Marina Bay Sands. You were probably about 500 meters away from it.
Oh, dang it.
That's it.
So sad.
Very, very, very close. Anyway, you've got a good reason to go back.
Exactly. Just to see the lion head.
Now, another one on your list is Taiwan. What made you go to Taiwan?
Well, I had probably one of the coolest opportunities. So I have a professor that I actually went to Europe with on my study abroad thing. She's from Taipei, Taiwan. And, we had always joked about like, oh, maybe you could come see me in Taiwan. And finally I was like, oh, well, I'm a lot closer to Taiwan right now than I would have been in the US. And so she goes home for holidays with her family in Taipei. So somehow it worked out for me to go visit her for a few days. Well, about a week, actually.
Great.
So I got to go to Taipei and actually stay with her, and I'm so thankful to have her, because I think I would still be lost there if I didn't have her. But she took me all around to the touristy spots, which she has never really gotten to do since she lived there. So it was kind of fun on both ends to get to do all these touristy things.
It's a very underrated place, Taiwan.
Yes.
And from a tourist perspective, there's so much to see, even, again, when you get out of the city as well, and when you get out of Taipei. There's some really beautiful parts to the island. So what about 101? Did you go there and do a bit of sightseeing?
Yes, that was like the first thing we did, and went all the way up the tower and walked around that area. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize how big Taipei was, actually, because once you're up there, you could see everything.
Yeah.
We had a gorgeous clear day, so you really could actually see everything.
Did you get to the markets?
Yes. Yep. Oh gosh, we went to so many markets, I can't even remember them all. And I think we had dinner a few nights there, pick and choose all the different things. Everything was so cheap, so we could eat until our heart's desire, basically.
There's some amazing food in Taipei.
Oh my gosh, there was such good food, except probably the one thing I never want to eat again was like pig's blood cake.
Right.
Oh, I survived, obviously, I'm still alive, but it's like pig's blood mixed with rice and dipped in like a peanut butter powder on a stick.
Right.
Never gonna eat that again, but most of the time was my professor going down the markets and being like, oh, try this. So I didn't even know what I was eating half the time.
Yeah.
But, it tasted pretty good.
You got to try these things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Branch out.
just for people listening, I mentioned 101. It's actually a building called Taipei 101. It stands 509 meters above the ground, and it's it's actually shaped like a bamboo.
Yeah.
And it's got a really fascinating skyline and everything. So when you get up there, and the markets I was referring to are called the Shilin Market. There's a lot of night markets in Taipei. Great place to go and check out. And it is a big city. It's got a population of 2.6 million people.
Oh, wow.
So when you get there, make sure that you are a people person, because there's lots of people to say hi to. Yeah.
Yes,
fantastic.
lots of people.
So, Leslie, before we finish up today, we've rushed through our time, as we always do when we're chatting, because it's so nice to speak to you. Really interested to know now the combination of all these different travel experiences you've had since you left Wisconsin to go to Australia and New Zealand and all the places you've mentioned today. How do you think those experiences have changed you as a person and also your view on the world?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I have learned through all of this is finding confidence when you travel. You know, I think before this experience, I was so scared to do things by myself. And once I got to Australia and started doing things, I actually loved doing things by myself and being able to, you know, travel to all these places by myself and navigate. You know, I could do it, and I've proved to myself I can do it. So now I think I'll definitely be traveling a lot more because I have that confidence. So that's definitely been one of the biggest things I've learned. And I think that's a huge thing anytime you travel, is learning how to navigate and feeling that confidence.
And how's the experience changed your view on the world? You know, you've been to lots of different countries and seen cultures and being immersed in that. How do you see the world now versus what we're perhaps told sometimes through the media and all the rest of it?
You know, I think the biggest thing is you have to experience it for yourself. I mean, I've heard a lot of things about Australia, but once I was finally there and learning all these things, you know, it just changes all your opinions because you're there living it. And even all these little trips and stuff that I got to take, you know, I was able to take in a lot of things and actually learn for myself what their culture was like. And, you know, I'll forever be changed by that.
Fantastic. And what did you miss the most about from home when you were away doing all this traveling?
I mean, other than like my family or my pets, one of the biggest things I missed was, and this might sound really weird, but like some of our foods that we have, because I think Australia and many of the places that I went to were very made things from scratch, which I loved. But I mean, I'm not going to lie, I definitely was looking for my Kraft mac and cheese boxed macaroni when I came back home. So I missed little aspects like that, but forever will be appreciative of everything that I got to do.
You can take the girl out of America, but you can't take the America out of the girl.
So true. So true.
Leslie, it's been a lot of fun having you back on my show, and I would like to propose a challenge to you now.
Okay.
I'd like you to come back in 5 years from now.
Oh, wow.
Because I want to have an ongoing recap with you about all the different travel experiences you have as your life goes forward and how all those things unfold and your view on the world as it keeps evolving. Would you like to do that?
Yes, I would love that.
Okay, so let's book a date 5 years from now.
Oh, goodness.
I'll put it in my schedule, and we'll make sure that we reconnect again and share with the world your ongoing travel experiences.
Yeah, my gosh. Think of all the things I've done in the last 6 months. I can't imagine 5 years from now.
Exactly right. So that's a date for 2025.
Oh, wow. Oh, I'll be old.
Leslie, thank you very much for
Thank you.
joining me again and for sharing with my audience all about being an au pair and all the wonderful places that you got to experience through that journey. It's been a real eye-opener and a lot of fun with us today. So thanks for coming back on the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me back.
Truly a delightful human being is Leslie Rose Petersen from Wisconsin in the United States, and that was her sharing with us all her amazing journey of being an au pair in Australia and getting to see some other magnificent sights as well as some other beautiful countries, including New Zealand. where she did her first skydiving experience. Something she'll never forget, that's for sure. I wonder how many listening to the show today have jumped out of a plane with a parachute on their backs. It's one to be done, that's for sure. Now, if you've enjoyed Leslie as a guest today, you can vote for her. Yes, we've got the 2019-2020 Global Travel Channel Podcast Awards coming up, and on June the 9th this year, we will be announcing the winners in different categories. So if you want to vote for Leslie, all you have to do is go across to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com, click on the awards page, and you can do it all online, and within a few seconds you can vote for Leslie and put her as a nominee in one of the amazing categories that we have there. And also, while you're there, why don't you listen to some more podcasts, because I've got some exceptionally talented people on my show who have done some amazing travel adventures around the world, and I'm sure if they won't inspire, they'll motivate. If they don't motivate, they'll educate, and if they don't educate, they'll do all of the above. So there you go, there's a challenge. Get over and listen to as many of those as you can. If you enjoy the podcast show, please tell a friend, a family member, a work colleague, or even a complete stranger about this show. We'd love to get more people talking about the Global Travel Channel show around the world, and if you can help us out do that, we would be very grateful for that. Okay, well, that's it for me for this particular episode. My name is Mark Philpott. Until we meet again next time, be safe and be well, everyone.